I want you to imagine standing in front of a brand new parking lot. The black asphalt is smooth and perfect. There are white lines painted for 50 cars. People are parking there every single day. They walk to the community pool. They walk to the fancy clubhouse. They think everything is normal. But here is the thing that will make your jaw drop. That parking lot, every single inch of it sits on land that belongs to one man, and nobody knows it. The HOA board has no idea. The construction company has no idea. All those people parking their cars have no idea. They built this whole thing without asking permission. They never checked who owned the land. They just assumed it belonged to the neighborhood. And now, after 8 long years away, a 72-year-old man named Harold Bennett is standing at the edge of that parking lot. He is holding a piece of paper in his wrinkled hands. That paper proves he owns every bit of ground beneath their feet. And the HOA president? She is walking toward him right now with the most confused look on her face. She has no clue that her world is about to turn upside down. What do you think Harold is going to do? What would you do if you found out someone built on your land without asking? Stay with me because this story is absolutely wild. Let me take you back to where it all began. Harold Bennett grew up in a small town in Ohio. His father was a factory worker. His mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. They did not have much money, but they had something more important. They had love. Every night, the Bennett family sat together for dinner. They talked about their days. They laughed at silly jokes. And Harold's father always said the same thing before bed. He would look at young Harold and say, "Son, treat people the way you want to be treated, even when they don't deserve it. That's what makes a man." Harold carried those words with him his whole life. When Harold turned 18, he got a job at a local hardware store. He worked hard every single day. He swept floors. He carried heavy boxes. He helped customers find exactly what they needed. The owner of the store was an old man named Mr. Patterson. He watched Harold work for many years. He saw how honest Harold was. He saw how Harold never complained. He saw how Harold treated every customer with respect, even the grumpy ones. One day, Mr. Patterson called Harold into his office. Harold was nervous. He thought maybe he did something wrong. But Mr. Patterson had a smile on his face. "Harold," the old man said, "I've been watching you for 15 years. You're the hardest worker I've ever seen. I have no children, no family. When I die, I want you to have this store." Harold could not believe his ears. He tried to say no. He said it was too much. But Mr. Patterson insisted. And 5 years later, when Mr. Patterson passed away peacefully in his sleep, Harold became the owner of the hardware store. Harold ran that store for 40 more years. He became a pillar of the community. Everyone knew him. Everyone loved him. When people could not afford to fix their leaky pipes, Harold helped them anyway. When young couples needed supplies for their first home, Harold gave them discounts. He remembered what his father taught him. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Along the way, Harold got married to a beautiful woman named Dorothy. They had 2 children together, a son named Michael and a daughter named Sarah. Life was good. Life was very good. But Harold was also smart with his money. He saved every penny he could, and when he turned 55, he made a decision that would change everything. A new neighborhood was being built about 30 miles away. It was called Riverside Estates. The developers were selling land cheap because they needed money, fast. Harold bought 2 acres right at the entrance of the neighborhood. He paid $20,000 for that land. It was not much back then, but Harold knew land was always a good investment. He thought maybe one day he would build something there, a small shop, a little business, but life got busy. The kids grew up, they moved away, and Harold just held onto the land. He paid the taxes every single year. He kept all his paperwork in a safe in his bedroom. He never forgot about those 2 acres, but he also never did anything with them. Then tragedy struck. Dorothy got sick. The doctors said it was cancer. Harold spent every moment by her side. He sold the hardware store so he could take care of her full-time. For 3 long years, he held her hand. He told her stories. He made her laugh when she felt like crying. And then one cold winter morning, Dorothy closed her eyes for the last time. Harold was heartbroken. The house felt empty without her. Every room reminded him of the woman he loved. His children begged him to come live with them. Michael lived in California. Sarah lived in Florida. At first, Harold said no. This was his home. He could not leave. But after a year of sitting alone in that empty house, Harold changed his mind. He needed a fresh start. He needed to be around family. So he packed his bags and moved to Florida to live with his daughter Sarah and her family. Before he left, Harold made sure everything was in order. He sold his house. He closed all his local accounts. But he kept that land at Riverside Estates. He kept paying the taxes. Every year, the bill came to Sarah's address in Florida. Every year, Harold wrote a check and sent it back. The land was his. It would always be his. 8 years passed. Harold turned 72. His grandchildren grew tall and strong. He watched them play soccer. He helped them with homework. He told them stories about their grandmother, Dorothy. Life was peaceful. Life was calm, but something was pulling at Harold's heart. He missed Ohio. He missed the changing seasons. He missed the smell of autumn leaves, and he started thinking about that land he owned. What was it like now? What had happened to Riverside Estates after all these years? One day, Harold made a decision. He was going to go back, just for a visit. He wanted to see his old town. He wanted to see his land. He wanted to remember who he used to be before Dorothy got sick. Before everything changed, Sarah drove him to the airport. She hugged him tight. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" she asked. "You could just stay here with us." Harold smiled. "I need to do this, sweetheart. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Don't you worry about your old man." The flight was long. Harold looked out the window at the clouds. He thought about Dorothy. He thought about his parents. He thought about all the years that had passed so quickly. It felt like just yesterday he was a young man sweeping floors at the hardware store. Now here he was, an old man with gray hair and wrinkled hands. Time moved so fast, too fast. When the plane landed, Harold rented a small car. He drove through his old town first. So much had changed. The hardware store was now a coffee shop. The movie theater where he took Dorothy on their first date was torn down. A parking garage stood in its place. Harold felt sad, but he also felt grateful. He had so many good memories here. Nobody could take those away. The next morning, Harold drove to Riverside Estates. His heart beat faster as he got closer. He had not seen this place in over 20 years. He wondered what it looked like now. But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. The neighborhood had grown so much. There were hundreds of houses now. Beautiful houses with green lawns and fancy cars in the driveways. There was a gate at the entrance, with a guard sitting inside. Harold rolled down his window. "Can I help you, sir?" the guard asked. "I'm just visiting," Harold said. "I used to own some land here." The guard looked confused but waved him through. Harold drove slowly through the neighborhood. Everything was so different, so fancy, so expensive. He saw families walking their dogs. He saw children riding bikes. He saw a big sign that said, "Riverside Estates Community Pool and Clubhouse." And that's when he saw it. Right next to the community pool. Right next to the fancy clubhouse. There was a huge parking lot, brand new, perfectly paved. 50 parking spaces at least. People were parked there right now. They were unloading pool toys. They were carrying coolers. They were laughing and talking. Harold's heart nearly stopped. He knew exactly where that parking lot was built. He knew because he had walked that land 20 years ago. He had stood on that exact spot. and imagined what he might build there someday. That parking lot was on his land, his 2 acres. The acres he still owned. The acres he still paid taxes on. Harold pulled his car to the side of the road. His hands were shaking. He could not believe what he was seeing. Someone had built a parking lot on his property. A whole parking lot. Without asking. Without permission. Without even checking who owned the land. How was this possible? Harold sat in his car for a long time. He watched people come and go. He watched them park on his land like they owned it. His mind was spinning. What should he do? Who should he call? This was wrong. This was so wrong. Finally, Harold got out of his car. His legs felt weak, but he walked toward the parking lot anyway. He needed to look closer. He needed to understand what happened. As he walked, he noticed a woman marching toward him. She was maybe 50 years old. She had blonde hair and wore expensive clothes. A big necklace hung around her neck. She had a clipboard in her hand and a frown on her face. "Excuse me," she called out. "Excuse me, sir." Harold stopped walking. The woman reached him and planted herself right in front of him. She looked him up and down like he was a bug she wanted to squash. "I don't recognize you," she said. "Are you a resident here?" "No," Harold said calmly. "I'm just visiting." "Visiting who?" "No one in particular. I used to own land here." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Used to own land? Well, this is a private community now. We have rules, lots of rules. You can't just wander around wherever you please." Harold looked at the woman. She was not being kind. She was not being welcoming. She was being rude. And for some reason, Harold could not help but smile. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. May I ask who you are?" The woman puffed out her chest. "I'm Victoria Mansfield, president of the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association. I run this community, and I take that job very seriously." Harold nodded. "It's nice to meet you, Victoria. My name is Harold." Victoria did not shake his hand. She barely looked at him. "Mr. Bennett, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This parking lot is for residents only. The pool is for residents only. The clubhouse is for residents only. Everything here is for residents only." Harold looked at the parking lot again. Then he looked back at Victoria. "This parking lot," he said slowly. "When was it built?" Victoria seemed surprised by the question. "What does that matter?" "I'm just curious." Victoria sighed like Harold was wasting her precious time. "It was built 3 years ago. The community needed more parking, so the board approved construction. I personally oversaw the project. It cost $200,000, top quality materials, best contractor in the state." "And who owns this land?" Harold asked. Victoria laughed. "What do you mean, who owns it?" "The HOA owns it. This is HOA property. Now please, Mr. Bennett, I really must ask you to leave." Harold's heart was pounding, but his voice stayed calm. His father taught him to always stay calm. "I think there might be a problem," Harold said. Victoria's smile disappeared. "What kind of problem?" Harold reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. He had brought it from Florida just in case he needed proof. He unfolded it slowly and held it up. "This is the deed to 2 acres of land at the entrance of Riverside Estates," Harold said. "I bought it over 20 years ago. I've paid taxes on it every single year, and according to my calculations, this parking lot is sitting right in the middle of my property." Victoria's face went white. "Before you go to the next chapter, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing all the different places around the world. Whether you're in Texas, New York, Florida, California, or anywhere else, let me know. Now let's keep going because things are about to get really intense." Victoria stood frozen like a statue. Her mouth hung open. Her eyes were wide. She looked at the paper in Harold's hands like it was a poisonous snake. For a long moment, She did not say anything. She could not say anything. The most powerful woman in Riverside Estates was completely speechless. Harold waited patiently. He had learned a long time ago that silence was powerful. Sometimes you just had to let people think. Let them process. Let them understand the weight of what they were facing. Finally, Victoria found her voice, but it came out shaky, uncertain, nothing like the confident woman who had marched toward him just minutes ago. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That's absolutely impossible. We checked everything. The lawyers checked everything. There's no way we built on someone else's land." Harold kept his voice gentle. He was not trying to be mean. He was not trying to scare her. He just wanted the truth to come out. "I understand this is a shock," he said. "But I have all the paperwork. I have the original deed. I have 20 years of tax receipts. I have surveys from when I first bought the property. This land belongs to me, Victoria. It always has." Victoria's hands started shaking. The clipboard she was holding fell to the ground with a loud clatter. She did not pick it up. She just stared at Harold like he had told her the sky was falling. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. Her voice was getting higher, more panicked. "Do you have any idea what this means?" "I think I do," Harold said calmly. $200,000. Victoria shouted. "We spent $200,000 on this parking lot. The community voted. We took out a loan. We have been paying that loan for 3 years, and now you're telling me it's all on your land?" People in the parking lot were starting to stare. A man loading pool chairs into his car stopped what he was doing. A woman with 2 small children pulled them closer to her. Everyone was watching the HOA president have a meltdown right in the middle of the parking lot. Victoria noticed the attention. She grabbed Harold's arm and pulled him away from the crowd. Her grip was tight, too tight, but Harold did not complain. He let her lead him to a bench near some trees where they could talk more privately. "Listen to me," Victoria said. Her voice was low and intense. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you cannot just show up here and claim you own this land. That's not how things work. We have lawyers, we have contracts, we have insurance. You can't just wave a piece of paper and expect everyone to believe you." Harold sat down on the bench. His old legs were tired from all the standing. He looked up at Victoria with kind eyes. Even though she was being rude, he felt sorry for her. She was scared. She had made a terrible mistake, and now she was going to have to face the consequences. "Victoria," he said softly, "I'm not trying to cause problems. I really am not. I came back to Ohio just to visit. I wanted to see my old town. I wanted to see my land. I had no idea anyone had built anything here. This is just as much a surprise to me as it is to you." Victoria started pacing back and forth. Her expensive shoes clicked on the sidewalk. Her hands were balled into fists. "This cannot be happening," she muttered. "This cannot be happening. I'm the president of this HOA. I approved this project. If we built on someone else's land, that's on me. That's my responsibility. The board will blame me. The residents will blame me. Everyone will blame me." Harold watched her pace. He remembered what his father always said. "Treat people the way you want to be treated, even when they don't deserve it." "Victoria," he said, "let's not panic. Let's figure this out together. Maybe there's been a mistake. Maybe the records got mixed up somehow. Why don't we go to the county office tomorrow and look at the official maps? We can see exactly where my property starts and where it ends. Then we'll know for sure." Victoria stopped pacing. She looked at Harold like she was seeing him for the first time, like she was surprised that he was being reasonable instead of angry. "You would do that?" she asked. "You would go with me to check?" "Of course," Harold said. "I'm not your enemy, Victoria. I'm just an old man trying to understand what happened to his land." Victoria took a deep breath. Some of the panic left her face. She sat down on the bench next to Harold. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, watching people walk by. "I'm sorry," Victoria said quietly. I'm sorry for how I treated you when you first arrived. I was rude. I was dismissive. That wasn't right. Harold smiled. It's okay. You were protecting your community. I understand. Victoria shook her head. No, it's not okay. I've been so focused on rules and regulations that I forgot how to be kind. My mother would be ashamed of me. Harold patted her hand gently. We all make mistakes. The important thing is what we do next. They agreed to meet the next morning at the county recorder's office. Harold drove back to his hotel feeling strange. Part of him was angry about the parking lot. That was his land. Someone should have asked him. Someone should have checked. But another part of him felt bad for Victoria. She was going to face serious consequences for this mistake. Her whole reputation was on the line. That night, Harold could not sleep. He lay in his hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Dorothy. He wondered what she would tell him to do. Dorothy was always the wise one. She always knew the right thing to say. Be kind, Harold whispered to himself. That's what she would say. Be kind, Harold, even when it's hard. The next morning, Harold put on his nicest shirt. He combed his gray hair carefully. He wanted to look respectable. He wanted people to take him seriously. Then he drove to the county recorder's office and waited in the parking lot. Victoria arrived 10 minutes later. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was messy. Her clothes were wrinkled. She clearly had not slept either. Ready? Harold asked. Victoria nodded. Let's get this over with. They walked inside together. The county recorder's office was a boring government building. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of old paper and coffee. A woman at the front desk looked up when they entered. Can I help you? She asked. We need to look at property records, Harold said, for Riverside Estates. The woman nodded and led them to a back room filled with filing cabinets and computers. She helped them pull up the official county maps. She showed them how to read the property lines. And then she left them alone to figure things out. Harold and Victoria leaned over the computer screen. They looked at the map of Riverside Estates. They found the community pool. They found the clubhouse. They found the parking lot. And then they found Harold's 2 acres. Victoria gasped. The property lines were crystal clear. Harold's land started exactly where he said it did. And the parking lot? It was sitting right in the middle of his property. Not just a little bit. The entire parking lot. Every single parking space. Every inch of asphalt. It was all on Harold's land. Oh my God, Victoria whispered. Oh my God, it's true. It's all true. Harold stared at the screen. He had known it in his heart, but seeing it officially was different. Someone really had built on his land. Without permission, without compensation, without even bothering to check. Victoria put her head in her hands. How did this happen? How did nobody catch this? We hired lawyers. We hired surveyors. Someone should have found this. Harold thought about it for a moment. Maybe they only checked who owned the land inside the neighborhood. My property was technically at the entrance, before the neighborhood officially started. It was kind of in a gray area. Victoria groaned. That's exactly what happened. I remember now. The surveyor said the land at the entrance was complicated, something about old records and missing files. But he said it would be fine. He said nobody had touched that land in decades. We assumed it belonged to the county. We assumed we could just use it. You assumed, Harold said gently. But you never verified. Victoria nodded miserably. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and now the whole community is going to pay for it. They drove back to Riverside Estates in silence. Victoria stared out the window the whole way. Harold could tell she was thinking hard, trying to figure out what to do next, trying to find a way out of this mess. When they arrived at the community clubhouse, Victoria asked Harold to wait in the lobby. She needed to call an emergency board meeting. She needed to tell the other board members what was happening. Harold sat in a comfortable chair and looked around. The clubhouse was beautiful. Fancy furniture, expensive artwork on the walls, a huge fireplace in the corner. This community had money, lots of money. And they had spent a big chunk of it on a parking lot they did not own. An hour passed. Harold could hear raised voices coming from the conference room down the hall. People were yelling. People were arguing. He heard Victoria's voice trying to calm everyone down. He heard a man's voice shouting that this was unacceptable. He heard a woman's voice demanding to know how this could happen. Finally, the door opened. Victoria walked out looking even more exhausted than before. Behind her came 4 other people. They must be the board members, Harold thought. 3 men and 1 woman. They all looked angry. They all looked scared. One of the men marched straight up to Harold. He was tall with silver hair and an expensive suit. His face was red with anger. "You're the one claiming to own our parking lot?" he demanded. Harold stood up slowly. "I don't claim to own it, sir. I do own it. The county records prove it." The man laughed bitterly. "County records can be wrong. Documents can be forged. How do we know you're not just some con artist trying to steal from our community?" Harold felt a flash of anger, but he pushed it down. "Stay calm," he reminded himself. "Stay calm. My name is Harold Bennett," he said firmly. "I bought that land over 20 years ago. I paid fair money for it. I have paid taxes on it every single year since. I am not a con artist. I am not a thief. I am a man who worked hard his whole life and made smart investments. That land is mine." The silver-haired man opened his mouth to argue more, but Victoria stepped between them. "Richard, stop," she said. "I verified everything this morning. Mr. Bennett is telling the truth. We built on his property. That's a fact. Now we need to figure out how to fix this." Richard, the silver-haired man, glared at Victoria. "Fix this? How exactly do you propose we fix this? We owe $120,000 on that parking lot loan. We spent another $80,000 on landscaping and lights, and now you're telling me it all belongs to some random old man?" "I'm not random," Harold said quietly. "And I'm not trying to hurt anyone." Richard ignored him. He turned to the other board members. "We need to call our lawyers. We need to fight this. There's no way I'm letting some stranger walk in here and take our property." The woman board member spoke up. "Richard, it's not our property. That's the whole point. We made a mistake. A huge mistake. And now we need to deal with the consequences." "Consequences?" Richard shouted. "The consequence is that this man could demand hundreds of thousands of dollars from us. He could force us to tear down the parking lot. He could sue us into oblivion. Is that what you want, Patricia?" Patricia, the woman board member, looked at Harold with curious eyes. "What do you want, Mr. Bennett? You came all this way. You discovered this mess. What are you hoping to get out of it?" Everyone went silent. They all stared at Harold. Even Victoria held her breath, waiting for his answer. Harold thought carefully before speaking. This was an important moment. Whatever he said next would shape everything that followed. "I want to be fair," Harold said slowly. "I want to do what's right. You folks made a mistake, a big one, but I don't think you did it on purpose. I don't think you woke up one day and said, 'Let's steal Harold Bennett's land.' You just didn't check carefully enough. You trusted the wrong people. It happens." Richard snorted. "So what? You're just going to forgive us? Let us keep the parking lot? I don't believe that for a second." Harold shook his head. "I didn't say that. That land means something to me. I bought it with money I worked hard to earn. I kept it all these years because I thought maybe someday I'd do something with it. You can't just take that away from me and expect me to smile and walk away." "Then what do you want?" Patricia asked again. Harold looked at each of them one by one. Victoria, who had been rude but had apologized. Richard, who was angry and suspicious. Patricia, who seemed reasonable. The other 2 board members, who had not said anything but looked worried. "I need time to think," Harold said. "This is a big decision. I don't want to make it in anger. I don't want to make it in haste. Give me a few days." Let me consider my options. And then, I'll tell you what I think is fair." Richard started to protest, but Patricia cut him off. "That sounds reasonable, Mr. Bennett. Take all the time you need. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready to talk." Harold took the card and put it in his pocket. Then he walked out of the clubhouse without looking back. The next few days were hard for Harold. He drove around his old town. He visited Dorothy's grave and put fresh flowers on it. He talked to her like she could still hear him. "What should I do, sweetheart?" he asked. "They took our land. They built on it without asking. Part of me wants to fight. Part of me wants to make them pay. But another part of me remembers what Dad always said. Treat people the way you want to be treated." The wind blew gently through the cemetery. The flowers on Dorothy's grave danced in the breeze, and Harold felt a sense of peace wash over him. "I know what you would say," he whispered. "You would say that money comes and goes, but kindness lasts forever. You would say that punishing people doesn't make things right. Only love does." Harold wiped a tear from his eye. He missed her so much. Every single day, he missed her. On the fourth day, Harold called Patricia. He was ready to talk. She arranged a meeting at the clubhouse for that evening. All the board members would be there. And this time, they would listen to whatever Harold had to say. When Harold walked into the conference room that night, everyone was already seated. Victoria sat at the head of the table. Richard sat with his arms crossed, still looking angry. Patricia gave Harold a small smile. The other two board members watched him nervously. Harold sat down in an empty chair. He pulled out a piece of paper he had written notes on. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I've thought long and hard about this situation," he said, "and I've decided that I don't want to fight. I don't want lawyers. I don't want court battles. Life is too short for all that." Richard leaned forward. "So you're going to let us keep the parking lot?" "Let me finish," Harold said firmly. "I'm not going to fight, but I'm also not going to just give away my land. That wouldn't be fair to me. Here's what I propose." He looked at his notes. "First, I want the HOA to officially acknowledge that the parking lot is on my land. I want that in writing. Second, I want the HOA to pay me fair market value for the 2 acres. Not what I paid 20 years ago, what it's worth today. I had an appraiser look at it. He said those 2 acres are now worth about $350,000. Richard gasped. $350,000? That's outrageous. Let him finish. Richard, Patricia said. Harold continued. I know that's a lot of money. I know the HOA is already paying off the loan for the parking lot, so I'm willing to work with you. You can pay me over 10 years. That's $35,000 a year. Plus, you'll continue to pay all property taxes on that land, since you're using it. And in return, I'll sign over full ownership to the HOA once the final payment is made. The room was silent. Everyone was doing math in their heads. Victoria spoke first. That's actually very generous, Mr. Bennett. You could have demanded much more. You could have taken us to court and won. Triple damages. I know, Harold said, but what would that accomplish? You'd go bankrupt. The community would suffer. Families would lose their homes because they couldn't afford the special assessments. I don't want that on my conscience. Patricia smiled. You're a good man, Mr. Bennett. I try to be, Harold said. My father taught me that kindness is more important than winning. My wife taught me that forgiveness heals everyone, not just the person being forgiven. I'm 72 years old. I don't have time for hatred and anger anymore. Richard still looked unhappy, but even he had to admit the offer was fair. Better than fair, actually. Harold was essentially giving them a 10-year interest-free loan to buy land they had already built on. The board voted unanimously to accept Harold's proposal. Even Richard raised his hand in favor. They would have their lawyers draw up the paperwork. They would announce the agreement to the community at the next general meeting. As everyone was leaving, Victoria pulled Harold aside. I want to thank you, she said. Not just for being fair about the land, but for teaching me something important. I've been so focused on rules and regulations that I forgot about the human side of things. I forgot about kindness. I forgot about empathy. You reminded me what really matters. Harold smiled. We all need reminders sometimes. The important thing is what we do after we remember. Victoria hugged him then. A real hug. The kind of hug you give someone who has changed your life. Will you come back and visit us? She asked. You're always welcome here now. In fact, I think we should name the parking lot after you. The Harold Bennett Memorial Parking Lot. Harold laughed. I'm not dead yet, Victoria. She laughed too. Okay, fine. The Harold Bennett parking lot then. No memorial required. 6 months later, Harold did come back to visit. The sign was already up. Harold Bennett parking lot, in big gold letters. Below it, a smaller sign read, a reminder that kindness is always the right choice. Harold stood in front of that sign with tears in his eyes. Dorothy would have loved this. His father would have been proud. The HOA had made their first payment right on time. The community had embraced Harold like he was one of their own. Victoria had even started a kindness initiative, encouraging residents to help their neighbors and welcome newcomers. And Harold? Harold had learned something too. He had learned that sometimes the biggest blessings come from the biggest problems. If the HOA had never built that parking lot, he never would have come back. He never would have met Victoria. He never would have seen how much good could come from choosing forgiveness over anger. As Harold drove away from Riverside Estates for the last time, he smiled. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. Life was beautiful. And kindness, his father was right. Kindness made all the difference. Before I end this story, I want to hear from you one more time. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the power of kindness and forgiveness, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.